everybody. I hope you all can hear me. Welcome to another X# online session. Today I want to talk with you about what we've done to the Visual Studio integration. I have a few PowerPoint slides, but most of it will spend, this afternoon will spend inside Visual Studio. So let's have a quick look at the PowerPoint. Okay, what are the topics that I want to cover today? As you can see, the first one is what is the biggest change we did in X# 2.5a with regard to Visual Studio. Since there's also sometimes some misconception about what's supposed to be part of our VS integration, and especially the often abused Intellisense, I want to give you an overview of what we've done. So, and each of these things that people call Intellisense have their own names, and I would like to show them and give with the proper names so we all know what we're talking about. One of the things that I want to mention is special is how we handle XML commands, what we do with it. There's a few things that are not working at the moment. I want to briefly touch those too, and I want to share with you some of the plans we have, and I especially would like to also hear from you what you guys think is should be done, what's important. Okay, let's switch to another screen. Good. You all see now a Visual Studio screen here. This is an installation of Visual Studio 2019, and let's start with the standard 2019. This is what I want to show you is the biggest change we did in X# 2.5a. And I think the best way to show it to you is by demonstrating it. Move some things away. Okay. I'm going to open a solution, especially the runtime solution that we have. And at this moment, I'm running to 4a, so that's the previous build. And I can keep on talking because when it's loading, there are 40 projects in this one. It's not the biggest one we've worked with, but it takes a while. First, Visual Studio opens the solution file and finds all the project files in there, and then it passes us the list of file names for each of the projects. And then what you will see on the bottom is that we see this message that many of you have seen, walking, and then a project name followed by file names. And this actually takes a while. And so you can, of course, you can already start editing, but we got some feedback that this was not optimal, especially during this process of walking files. Visual Studio was a bit slow, a bit sluggish. So what I would like to explain what it was doing, because if you work in an editor, you would like to know what functions are available, what methods are available. So for code completion, for displaying tooltips, you need this information. People who come from Visual Objects know that Visual Objects works with a repository, which is like a database that has information about the source code. We didn't have that in Visual Studio. So what we're doing at startup, in the previous version at least, we're actually scanning the complete source code of your solution and building an in-memory representation of the types, methods, properties, etc. Now, as you can see, since Visual Studio is still loading, this took a while. So what was, and now it's finished scanning, but now it loads what we call reference type. So it loads type information from external assemblies that are used inside this solution. And this also takes a while. So we got some feedback from customers saying, this is not optimal. Can you do something about it? And that was one of the biggest things we've done for 2.5. I'm going to close this solution now. Now I'm in a preview solution. If my icon is not on top of it, I can drag it. You can see here it says preview. This is Visual Studio 2019 preview, and I've loaded the latest 2.5 Visual Studio integration on this. And I'm going to open the same solution, so the runtime solution. Now, of course, it starts the same way. So on the bottom, you see that it's loading project files. And this is inevitable. So the solution has a list of projects, and we get this list of projects. But then what you'll see is that after this is done, it's almost immediately ready for action. So you see some scanning, you see some walking, and that's it. Now it's loading reference types, and it's done, basically. So I think this is a major improvement. It took a bit of work, but we have really improved the performance of loading Visual Studio solutions. What did we do? What did we change? I think the most important thing we changed is that we've added a repository, people in VO would call it. We added a database that stores information about the files and the types and the members inside your solution. This database is stored in a folder under your solution, a hidden folder that Visual Studio already creates, and we are saving the state of the contents of your repository, so I would say the contents of your solution in this file. And when you open Visual Studio, we actually scan the disk to see if any of the files were changed since we last read them. And if they were changed, we rescan it, and otherwise we don't have to scan the information. Now, if you work with large solutions, and I know some of you do, I've seen the solution from a customer who actually sponsored this development with about 30,000 files. And before that was really crazy. It was impossible to work with. But with the current state of work, the current speed of loading, you can actually have solutions with this site. So I think this was a major improvement, and it's really made working with Visual Studio much better than it was in the previous builds. So what are we doing to scan this information? Actually, one of the changes we also made is that if you look in Visual Studio, you see the editor here, you see the colors in the editor. I'll increase the font a bit so you can. Then somehow we need to determine what the colors are and what the keyword is, what the identifier is, what a param is, curlies, etc. And what we're doing, what we were already doing in Visual Studio, was using the same lexer that the compiler has. And the lexer is the component that actually takes strings in the source code and converts it into a string of tokens. I think I see a message in chat. Oh no, this is just a friendly message from one of the guests. So we've used this lexer, but what we didn't do is after we use this lexer and then we can determine the colors. What we didn't do was parse the entities in the editor using the same lexer. Now what we've changed is that we're now using the same tokens that we already generated for the editor to parse entities. And we parse it actually partially. So we do not parse it like the compiler does, because we do not, or actually we do know that often the source code in your editor is incomplete. Let's say, in this case, the end try could be missing. Now, a try without an end try would be invalid in the compiler, would throw an exception or an error, and parsing of the rest of the code would become a problem, because is this return actually the end of this function, or is this return, should it be part of the catch and should it be code after the end try? The parser doesn't know. So what we've done for Visual Studio is that we create a parser that doesn't really care about these kind of errors. And the most important task for it is to find wherever functions in this case, or if I go to another place in the source, let's take, for example, something from the RDT classes. In this case, we have a class, and it knows where methods start, etc. So it actually takes the source code and chops it into blocks of entities. The second thing this parser does, it looks for block keywords, because one of the things we also need in Visual Studio is, or actually we don't need it, but we'd like to give it to you, is the ability to collapse and expand blocks. So the parser looks for beginning, middle, and end keywords for blocks and stores this in information. And finally, what the parser also does is, for example, if you hover your mouse over something like this, ORED, you see a tooltip that says ORED as data field. And to do that, we actually need to determine that there's an ORED variable inside the contents of this particular method. So what the parser also does is when needed, when we, for example, when we do a tooltip, then it parses local variables. And the result, and especially I would say the result in the sense of which entities are there, so with methods, with properties, with successes and assigns, etc. This is stored in the database. And when we load Visual Studio, then actually this database is already there. And this really saves us a lot of startup time. And because it's in the database, we also do not have to use as much memory as we used in the past, because the complete object model that represents your code was actually quite large. The second thing we started startup, you may have seen it, is that reading type information from external files is also faster. Before we were using the system reflection namespace to load external assemblies, and using its getTypes method, we were extracting the types, and then using the methods all the time, we can extract methods and properties and fields. We switched from using as reflection in the system reflection namespace to using a methodology with an external assembly from the Mono project, the Mono Cecil assembly. This has a big advantage, it's faster, but it also allows us to easily unload assemblies, where in the past with system reflection has the problem that it actually holds on to an assembly. So it's almost impossible to unload it without actually killing an app domain. That would also make it difficult if you have a project that references another project written in C#, and the C# project is updated. You need to reload this external C# file to get its type information. Now, that requires throwing away the old information and reading the new information. With the Mono Cecil solution, this works much better. So we both improved the performance of working with our own code, because we save the information and the scanner that processes the information is faster than it was before, and we improved the way external reference data is loaded. So those two things make loading of your Visual Studio solution, even if it's a large solution, much faster. Okay, and I'm sure many of you have seen that the 2.5 build is faster. The first time you run it on a solution with the Visual Studio and the X# 2.5 integration, it needs to scan everything. But after that, it actually only scans changes. So if you checked out source code changed by one of your colleagues, then you will actually see that that particular file will be rescanned, but the rest is still the way it was the last time you read it, so it doesn't have to parse that again. Okay, this is a bit about what we've changed. Now I would like to go over a couple of features of things we've done in Visual Studio, which make up what people call Intellisense. And the first thing I've already mentioned, that is the keyword colorization. So we have keywords that are blue on my machine, but of course this is configurable in Visual Studio. We have identifiers, and you can also see, for example, that lines that are preprocessor instructions are in gray. And so we have set up different colors for different things. The second thing I've mentioned is we produce regions. So this kind of thing, like these regions that collapse and expand, this doesn't come for free in Visual Studio. Visual Studio has the ability to use regions, but of course someone has to tell them the reasons. And this is part of what we do in the Visual Studio integration, and that is for the if that and ifs, for if else and if, etc. One of the things that is a bit of a problem, but that is, I mentioned that before, if you have a missing keyword, you will see that something in the edge here disappears. What we're doing in the current implementation is say, if an entity is ready, is finished, so the start of a new entity is discovered, we actually clear the stack of open blocks, let's call it like that, and it starts all over again. So in the next entity, the if blocks, etc., collapse the way you expected. So we keep track of the blocks, and if an entity is finished, we clear the stack, so that way we always have a good block experience, basically. There's also another thing here, and I'm not sure, it doesn't really show it with my current color screen, but let's see if I can see it. No, my color scheme at the moment is not really nice, so you don't see it, but if you have another color scheme, you will see that if you select a word in the editor, that actually all the matching words also are colored with the same color. But this is also a feature that we do. So we actually scan the buffer, and all the LV stores in the buffer will have the same color, will be highlighted. Maybe if I switch, no, I'm not going to switch color screen. You'll have seen it. Another thing we've implemented is these tooltips. As you can see, we see tooltips over here. Visual Studio calls it quick info. And in the quick info, you get the prototype of a method or a function. But in this case, it's only the prototype. And now this is a special solution because I'm inside the runtime solution. Let's take an example. Let's see. Because I'm inside the runtime solution, I actually do not have the full type information that a normal project has. So let's create a new project here. As you can see, I'm now in a normal solution. It's probably too small on your, because this doesn't scale when I scale the font, but you actually get a tooltip, not just with the prototype, but also with a summary line. And this summary line comes from the external XML file that comes with the solution, or actually would say with the runtime files from X#. What we've changed into 5 is that you can now see where this function is coming from. So export function today is imported from the X#RT assembly. And this is not just for our own code. So if you do something like system string compare, and you hover over this, you will actually see that this compare method comes from MS-Corelib DLL. What we show you is the summary and the return information if you show a tooltip. And if you start typing, we actually show you also the parameters, and the first line here is the same summary line, and then on the bottom you'll see the descriptions for each of the parameters. And the arrows here actually indicate that there's overloads of this method, and you can actually, using the up and down arrow, walk through these overloads. So what we're doing is we're showing you a quick info based on the XML documentation and of course the information that we read from the external assembly. And we're also showing you parameter completion code, which is also based on the XML file and on the metadata that we read from the external assemblies. So this part of stuff actually, I would say, helps you code a lot. Now, one of the things we have done in 2.5, so our integration for 2.5 is the following. Let's write a function here. Now, if you start adding, now this is a feature, I'm sure people will say, why can you not automate that? And that's one of the things that we have on the to-do list. If I start adding a summary here, you will see now that if you hover over this function, what's new is that it actually shows you the location where this function was found. So in this case, it's a long path program PRG, and it shows you the summary of the method. And if you add a return clause here, for example, that will also be shown. And if you add remarks, these will be included as well. So what we've added in 2.5 is not just that we pick up XML documentation from outside, which is what you see in this case, because today is an external function in X# RTDLL, but also inside your solution, at least inside X# projects, you will actually see the tooltip enhanced with the information that's in the documentation commands that we've read when parsing the source file. I think that's a nice addition because you do not have to generate the external XML file to do this. We just pick up the information while we're scanning your source code. And we could do that without even killing performance. So it's actually didn't kill your performance, and we've given you extra functionality. Another thing that I would like to mention is something that most people think is part of code, is part of Intellisense, and actually is often called Intellisense, and that's this thing, is the code completion. This is what we call code completion. And one of the things we've changed in 2.5 is that it's not perfect yet, but this list now also shows you extension methods, at least for external types. So if you, let's say you declare a local a list as list int, you will now see that this is an extension method as creatable, as read-only, and it's not a method in the class itself. You can recognize it because there's a different icon in front of it. It's a static icon. So we try to give you also direct information about extension methods. And the list of extensions here is actually controlled, of course, by the using statement. So if you remove using link, well, it should have, as always if you demo something, but it shouldn't have included stuff that comes from link. But maybe, yeah, this is link. Okay, we found something that's not working correctly. It shouldn't have shown you that. But you get the idea that we're adding extension methods in your code completion. This, I think, also a nice feature. What we've also worked on is these things on the top. They call it in the combo boxes or the editor drop-down bar. In this case, I have only functions, so we only have a global scope. But if you add a class, you will actually see now that we have the global and the class, and we have the methods here. Now, what most people do not realize is that you can control what you see in this combo box. I'd really like to mention that. If you go to Tools option in Visual Studio and go to the text editor and try to find X sharp, it's in the bottom there. It's usually too complicated to do it like this. I also always recommend type X sharp here, and then you can see all the options for the text editor X sharp. And on the bottom here, you will see options that says, what do you want to see? Do you want to have fields in this navigation bar, these two combo boxes at the bottom? Do you want things to be sorted? And should the members combo box, that is the right combo box, show all members in the file or only the members of the current type? At this moment, it only shows you all files. That's why when I'm inside this class, I do not see the functions. If I disable that option, we now see all the members. The difference with the previous setting is also that now the method, why is it doing this? It's not supposed to do this. I think we found a problem. Okay. It's supposed to show you everything and it's not doing it. Okay, this is a problem. I've changed something here this week. So anyway, what I wanted to say is that if you show all methods, it doesn't show you bar as long, but full bar, because you may be able to see more than one method with the same name. So we need to prefix it. But for some reason, this is broken. Okay, this is going to go to my to-do list. Some more things, part of Visual Studio. One of the things we improved a lot, and I could probably better show you the large runtime solution, is we go to definition. As you already can see when I hover my mouse, is that we actually show you already here that this is part of a file over here. And by going to the definition, it actually skips there. In previous builds, this was sometimes a problem when you were skipping between functions defined in one assembly or one project and the use of the function in another project. This is now actually working as far as we know. And if you press Control minus, this is a hotkey in Visual Studio, it brings you back to the original location. Now, quite often you don't want to lose the focus of the method where you're working, but you just want to have a peek of what the method is doing. Now, from the context menu, you can see there's a peek definition. On my Visual Studio, that's Alt F12. And if you do that, you actually get a pop-up window that gives you a peek of the location where it's stored. So this go to definition and peek to definition are really useful in a large project where you can quickly have a view of, okay, what are the parameters doing? Now, in this case, it's really a method that does almost nothing. But if you have a bit more complicated method, and if people didn't document what the parameters were expected to be, this helps you looking at that code. Some other things that are probably worth to mention. I've already mentioned you see the color here of if-there's. If there's a define that is not active, then you will see, and I can show that by switching to release, because in release mode, the DBF debug should be gray. This is one of those days. Now it is. Okay, I needed to make a real change. As you can see now, the define debug underscore is not declared anymore. And you can actually see based on the color in the editor that this is an inactive region. And if I would have an else here, you will actually see that this color is now the active one. And if I change it, you can see it swapping around. So this is also part of what we do in Visual Studio. Our parser determines actually that, I should say this is not the parser, this is the preprocessor marks this code as inactive. Some other things that you may have seen is, as you can see, a matching of parameters, which is of course where you have just a single open and close parameter is not a big thing. But if you go to a line like this, it's already, again, it's easier to see that you can actually find the matching paren or the matching curly, and it makes your code easier. One of the things we also added, it's not perfectly complete yet, is code formatting. So I know some people have complained about it, but you can type if true, and then it indents, else it outdents, and if. We're not completely happy with this yet. And actually, I have a large to-do list that we want to give you much more control over this. This is one of the things we'll do in one of the next builds. Another thing that we've had is we've already had it from one of the early days, is something that Visual Studio called snippets. Now, if you want to know, I'm looking for the hotkey today. Control K-X on this one. We have snippets in there, and these snippets are like building blocks, and where you can actually, with the tab key, can go and fill in values, and if you're ready, you type enter, and there you go. This is going to become part of the code completion. So right now it isn't, but you, in the future, you will be able to type something like for, and then get the for snippet automatically visible. So this is one of the things we were going to add. Right now, you have to type the special snippet key to actually throw in a snippet, but we'll make it easier for you. One thing that I didn't show you on the previous screen of the options is, go back to the shop. There's an option here that says show completion list after a character is typed. I would recommend you to only use it at this moment when you have a not too big solution, because this could slow down typing. But this is something that we definitely want to enable by default in one of the next builds. And what it does is it actually helps you complete code by automatically, so not even, no, let's say it different way. If you type something and it's 3 characters, it's actually going to find keywords, snippets, local variables, method names, and provide you with a list of that. However, at this moment, if you have a very large solution, it takes a while for this combo box to appear. So that's why I recommend to not use it right now until we've actually finished that. But our idea is to make that work by default for a future build. It's already there, and if you have a not too big solution, it'll definitely work. So in this case, I type lrest. I know there's a restore variable, and actually there's apparently also an rest variable, and you can work with that. But as you can see, the typing has already slowed down a bit because of this feature. So that's why for large solutions, I do not recommend at the moment to enable that. A final feature that I would like to show for now is something that's called the task list. And many of us have used comments in the source code. Now this is just looking for C# files. I want to look for PSG files. I've used comments in the source code to say, I need to work on something. So a to-do comment. What I found is that even if you do that, this is something that you often forget to look at. Now, Visual Studio has a window called the task list. You can find it here in the view menu. It's called View Task List. What we have done in the 2.5a build is we actually take those tokens when we parse a source file, and we actually fill this task list. And I was kind of embarrassed when I implemented this and opened our runtime solution to see how many tasks there are still in there. And some of them are really no-brainers. So this helps you remember which task you still have to do in your source code. I think it's a useful addition, especially if you're in the afternoon, you think, what should I do today? I'm not going to start a major development thing, but let's clean up the code, bring up the task window, and see what's there. And you click on something and you go to the line. The task window gives you the ability to filter on a project, or you can filter on a file name, source file name. You can also search a tasklet. Let's say I want to search for optimize, and then we see all tasks that say we can optimize something there. And as you can see, there's still enough to optimize in our runtime, even though it's already much faster than the Vulkan runtime ever was. So the task window, I think, was also a valuable addition that we did in the last build. Good. I've already mentioned XML comments. We use the XML comments for both from external files and internal files. If you install X#, you can see this. The font is a bit small, but I'll give you a quick idea. Since a few builds, we now deliver external XML files for each of the assemblies that come with X#. Let's say here is the X# RT XML, and this XML file actually contains summaries, parameter descriptions, return descriptions, etc. for all the functions. Can I increase the font here? Yeah, probably. It was the wrong font, as always. So you see and what it does, it has the member name, and then there's for each overload, there's an entry here with summary information, optional parameter information, etc. Now, we support inside our Visual Studio and inside our compiler, we support generating these kind of XML comments. And if you want to use that, there's actually, let's go to the runtime assembly. I'll show you that. You can actually put this kind of blocks of information in front of a type or a method. As you can see, there are normal tags like summary or see also, which will produce a hyperlink in the help file. But you can also include external comments, which is what we're doing a lot. Because, for example, many methods have a comment about 0 and 1 based indexing. So we have a common information block that we include in these comments. We also have, on some locations, we have stuff like inherit doc, which says, I'm not documented here, but please inherit the documentation from another overload or from the parent class. So this is a way to describe your source code. And what the result of this is when you start compiling, now I'm going to the output folder again of our X# solution. Let's look at the sharp file. You actually get something like this, which is almost the same as what we saw in the assemblies folder before. This can already be distributed with your DLL files for people to get more information in the quick info and in the parameter tips. And that's where it's used for. What we have done, we've also used a tool to actually convert this to a help file. So this particular source has actually been used to produce let's take the left function, for example, to produce this documentation. So somewhere in our project, let's find the help, the left function. It's in RT. No, it's not in RT, it's in core. We can see it here. It's your core and in the functions. Here's the left function. Now, in this particular case, there's not much here because we used a tool to actually, I call it lifting. Some people would call it stealing, but we have actually taken the visual object documentation for the left function and somehow included this in our documentation. I think it's really useful to have something like this. So we've created this with a tool called Sandcastle Help File Builder. If you want to do something similar, have a look at Sandcastle. One of the problems we found there is that Sandcastle doesn't really understand how clipper calling convention works. And give you an example of a function. This function is substr, and let's look at its function in the source. This is the source code for the substr function. And as you can see, this is a clipper calling convention function. What does that mean? It means that all parameters are optional. And the code itself checks for the parameters. As you can see, it checks if it's a string and if it's nil, etc. So the way to implement this in .NET is either you create a substr function with 3 parameters and set defaults for each of the parameters, but we have chosen a different mechanism, and that's that we say we have a param array of parameters. Unfortunately, that produces something like this. Let me show it. Now I'm going to use Reflector to give you an idea of what is output, and now I'm using the debug version, could be released too. This is what we produce. Substr, and it says it has a compiler generated parameters array, and what we do is we enhance this method with an attribute, and inside the method we actually create the parameters that were declared and get the information out of this parameters array. And so inside the method we have the parameter. However, what Sandcastle sees is this. It sees this method, and even if we document parameters cTarget and start and count, it doesn't see a parameter cTarget and start and count. It sees a parameter $args. So if you want to document a solution that has a lot of clipper calling convention, then a tool like Sandcastle will not help you. We have added a special compiler flag that does a trick, and I'll show you what it produces. And if you are interested in this, contact us offline and we'll explain you what to do. But what we've done is we created a special version of the assembly with this function, and now the parameters are indeed called cTarget and start and count. As you can see, there's no body in here because this is never used in real code. It's just an empty function, and this is what we use to document our clipper calling convention functions. Now, unfortunately, there was a problem in this area, and that's why we got a complaint this week that there used to be a jump to source button, below the syntax, and that's missing. That's because we made a problem, we introduced a problem in 2.5 in the special compiler flag that takes care of automating the documentation generation, if you're still there. So if you want external, want to produce XML files for clip and calling conventions, you need to do some extra work. If you're interested in this compiler flag and how you can use it, contact me offline. Okay. Yeah, I also promised to show you what's not working in this release. Go back to Visual Studio. Visual Studio has a window called the class view. And as you can see in this solution, the only project is visible in the class view is the macro compiler. That's the C# solution project. X# projects are not visible here. And the same is true for the object view. So here is an option to go to the normally there's an option to go to the object browser. I don't see it. Oh no, I have to go to the view and object browser, but you will not see at this moment the Xshop object tree in the object browser. We will enable that for the next build. It says it's not visible. So unfortunately, we had to, or we didn't want to delay the release a lot, because we're no longer having the complete object model in memory for speed and memory reasons. We now have to dynamically create this object view whenever we need it for the class view and object view window. However, we thought releasing it with all the speed benefits was important enough, and actually we do not know many people who use class view and object view. I'm sure there are, but most people are not even using this. Good. Let's share another window. Move a few things around. Okay, we have some future plans for Visual Studio, but we welcome input from you guys. First of all, I already mentioned the formatting, and I have a hyperlink here. I hope it opens. It doesn't. Probably have to control click. Do you see this? No, you don't. Okay, you can find on GitHub a list of things that we have for the code formatting. Right now, our code formatting in the editor is limited, so we indent if blocks, do case statements, etc. We want to give you in the future, because there's so many people with so many preferences, full control over code formatting. So options like, do you want to indent between the begin namespace and? Do you want to indent methods or instance variables inside the class and class? Do you want to indent methods, or sorry, members, I should say, inside VO, structure unions, etc.? You can read it. So we want to give you a lot of control, and the idea is that inside the tools options window, you will get a preview, so you have an idea what everything does. For example, do you want to add spaces after a comma, spaces after a statement separator, the semicolon, or spaces after or before open and close parens or open and close curlies? I think by configuring this, we can probably make it work so that everybody can find a coding standard that actually fits their company. And if you have suggestions, yeah, the link to this GitHub topic is online, will be in the PowerPoint that I upload. You can also add suggestions if you want to. What we want to do in this area is add support also for .editor config. For those of you who do not know what it is, I think it comes from the Linux world. It's a file that you put in the source of your solution, in the root of the solution, that says, how do you want to have your tab settings? Do you want to have upper or lowercase keywords? What the idea is that all these preferences should also be stored in editor config. So, and by doing that, if the editor config is part of your Team Foundation server or GitHub project or repository, you can enforce a coding standard over your team, and so you will not have one developer add tabs in your source code and the other one add spaces. You have one common formatting style over all your source files. I know that it's if you don't do that, it quickly becomes a mess, your source. I don't think many of us would prefer this mess. So by using editor config, we can enforce a standard over a team. I know some of you have asked for this, and this is really on our to-do list. Go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, some of the other things that we have on our list, I'm not sure how important they are. We could really use some input from you guys. Is one of the things is entity separator lines. We used to have that in the earlier VO versions. I know C# and VB allow that, and this is like a horizontal line separating entities. We can already collapse entities, but this is an extra visual indicator that a new entity starts. Another thing we have on the list is highlighting Intellisense compile errors in the source code with a curly under the location where it's found. Identifier case synchronization, which is like to make sure that all the identifiers have the same casing in the same file. I'm going to skip the file and symbol dialog. I want to show you later. One of the things I have is decompile prototypes. If you work with C# and you right click on something that's not in the same solution, it gives you the option to actually generate a temporary file with the prototypes. I think it's useful. I like it a lot. So it's some of the things that I've put on our to-do list. The light bulb interface. Visual Studio allows you to add kind of tips to your code, and for example, we talked about a light bulb that lets you implement an interface, and it would appear if it detects that your class doesn't implement all the methods of an interface, and give you the option to automatically generate methods. And the normal way of doing it in other languages is then to implement the method with a throw not implemented exception. So you do have to implement it yourself, but at least it helps you so you don't forget to implement methods. Yeah, what I mentioned earlier is I would like to have the / automatically add XML comments, so with summary, returns, param tag, etc. So it makes it easier to help you document your code, especially since we now have the tooltips inside your own project that show you the information. It's good that the person who writes the method or who writes the function immediately documents it. It helps a lot. Even if you do not use external XML files inside the solution, it also already helps you document. Now, two things on this list that I want to show you in a C# add-on. And let me now go to another screen. Can you all see this Visual Studio? Okay, this is a C# solution. Actually, it's not just a C# solution. It is the solution where we have our source code for our compiler. And I'm using an add-in here, and there's a window in this add-in that I really like. And I'm considering if it's something that we should add to our own integration. Now, there's a key here. In this case, they've chosen Alt-Shift-O, which lists all the source files in the solution. Now, I know, let's say if you're in your solution here and you could type X# if you don't make a typo. This in Visual Studio will start searching, but you see I actually probably made a typo and it doesn't show me anything, but it's there, I know. Now this particular window created by the third-party tool is something that we can fairly easy also create. Now we have everything in the database. So by just incrementally typing, you get a quick overview of the files, not just by names, but also what I like a lot is the ability to see which files were last changed. Now, of course, you could see that in TFS or GitHub, but inside the solution, I think it's really nice to see the files in the order where they were changed. So you can quickly go back to a file that you just changed, you accidentally closed. Especially if you have large solutions. It happens to me a lot. I close a file and then, oh, where was it? And then you have to navigate through your Solution Explorer to find it again. I think having a list like this is a useful addition. A similar list they have in this tool, which I also would like to present, is called the find symbol. And find symbol is like finding type names, method names, property names over your complete solution. So in this case, it's the compiler, so I know there's a dialect somewhere. So I can type dialect, and this now shows me all the source code locations where dialect is used. And regardless of the project or the source file it is in. And then by quickly going there, I said, okay, I remember it was X# dialect. Okay, yeah, and now I see the file, and then I can go there, and I jump to the location where this was defined. I think personally that now we have everything in the database. It should be, with a database query, it's fairly easy to locate this, and I think we should add a UI for this. If you agree, let us know. And also, if you are missing something, let us know too, because we've said it before, but we are a user-driven project. If you are customers or our users miss something, let us know. And if we get enough votes or if we get a sponsor, then things will be added. Okay. Let's close thing, and I want to show you a final thing. I have to make sure that I roll back all the changes that I did to the SDK. Like I mentioned, the source code is in the database. Now, there's no magic here. We use SQLite. It's a common database. And if you work with Visual Studio, and I'm in the folder now where the runtime solution is, so there it is, you can see it. Visual Studio, at least the most recent version of Visual Studio, create a hidden folder called .vs. And inside this .vs folder, there's a subfolder for every solution in its parent folder. And this subfolder is called runtime, because our solution is called runtime. Now, as you can see, there's a v14, a v15, and v16 subfolder. These are used by Visual Studio itself. It has all kinds of stuff. I have no idea what it is, but I would not be surprised if some of these things are SQLite databases. Anyway, in the top level folder, so above v14, 15, 16, there's a file now called X# model XSDB. This is our SQLite model of the contents of your solution. I'm going to use a tool here that Wolfgang recommended a few weeks ago, and I downloaded it, said, well, let's give it a try, and it actually works great. And with this tool, I can look inside the SQLite database. So over here, you see that we have the files in my solution. So these are all the files. There's no secret here. This is where we store all the files that you found in your solution. Of course, we have not just files, we also have types. And as you can see here, with each type has an ID, it has a file ID, and as you can also see here, when there's XML documentation, we have a column with XML comments, so everything is in there. So we do not have to, when we see a reference to a method or a type, we can quickly pick the XML documentation from this Intellisense database. Now, to make working with this easier, we have added a few views because we normalize things, so we do not want to have the file names everywhere. But for example, if you want to have all the members, so let's say all the functions, etc., in a project, this is the list of all the members per project. Now, this one is, you can see here, let's assume you want to have something in project. Where are you? Project X# RT, this is project 13, and I want to see all the functions in this project. Function is kind 9, and I can say where ID project is 13 and kind 9. And now we see all the functions inside the X# RT project. It's still quite a lot. This is limited to 500. It's 785 functions. But you can imagine that from this database of information, we could also produce a open file dialog that we showed before, or we can produce a locate symbols dialog like before. So just to give you an idea, let's say if you want to find everything that has memvar, we can simply say name like memvar. And then we quickly find everything that is related to memvars. And as you can see, it has the file name in there, in one of the columns on the right. It has the column and end, start column and start line. And that way we can add navigation. And this is what we use for go to definition. And we can also use this in a dialog that gives you a list of all the symbols in there. This is one of the things I'm thinking of implementing in one of the next builds, because I personally think it's very useful to be able to do that. Of course, we have go to definition, but if you're not sure about the name of something, being able to do a partial search is really helpful, I think. Okay. And of course, you are free to use this too. If you want to write a tool that extracts that information and does something with it internally, go ahead. Of course, we may change stuff. Actually, we will change stuff over time. What we did do is we added a version object here with just one column. When we add something, we'll increment the version number so you know that the database has new features, or maybe new columns or new tables. Okay, that's what I wanted to show for now. Are there any questions? Or was this useful? Okay,
Hello, Robert.
Where do I see the GitHub X# public issue for authority link on the forum? I never look on GitHub. Well, normally when someone posts a ticket on a forum, they either create a GitHub ticket themselves, or we create it and then we usually put the link in there. But you can always go to GitHub to the X# public location and look at the issues yourself if you want, or add issues. And yeah, if you never go to GitHub, then you won't see them. GitHub is the place where we store our open tickets, our tickets for the compiler, for the runtime, for the Visual Studio integration. I should say the compiler source code is not in X# public, but we do keep the list of issues on X# public to have just one location where all our issues are. And if we work on a ticket, or if we fix a ticket, this will also usually be marked with the ticket number. So In the ticket, you will find a link to the check-in where the changed source code is visible. I would recommend to use that. I'm not sure what Dick asked the question. I do not monitor the forum. I do monitor the forum. I would recommend, as you said, probably better. No, forum is for discussions, and forum is. But if you find an obvious issue and you want to include example source code, that's where we use GitHub. And we also use GitHub for things that are on our to-do list, basically. Things that we want to implement that are not bugs, but are, let's say, enhancements for future development. So if you have something that you would like to see implemented in the future, you could upload or add a ticket on GitHub or issue on GitHub. We will flag the ticket with labels, say this is an enhancement or this is a bug, and this regards RDDs, or this has to do with let's say the VO runtime, and then you can monitor that if you want on GitHub. If you created a ticket yourself, you will get notifications whenever we change something to the ticket. Are there any other questions? Let's stop sharing the screen so we have. No? I often see that when I have tab / command. No, I don't know how. I've never seen that, so we need to. So, if you want to ask your voice, you should be able to enable your microphone and then speak. I'm not sure who wants to talk. But oh, if it's blocked, then wait. Then where are the participants? Chris should be allowed the mic. His monitor. He should be able to set the microphones on. I'll reclaim the host so I can do that myself now. Security. Yeah, so you're now able to talk if you want. So if someone has a comment that you want to discuss, the mics are open now. Well, I've just enabled the option, so you should be able to unmute yourself now. Otherwise, you found a problem in Zoom. No, doesn't work. But then we found an issue in Zoom. I'm sorry about that. You know, technology. Chris, you can speak, can't you?
Yeah, I think that worked now.
I hear no sound.
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, well, apparently we have an audio problem. Um, Sorry about that. Can you try again? Can you try to speak again, Chris?
Yeah. Hello, Robert.
Ah,
Hello,
okay.
everybody.
Hello, yeah. Now I hear something. Okay, sorry about this. There was something wrong, I think, on my side. My headphone was off, switched off for some reason. Um, so that's why I kept on talking without being interrupted because we shut you guys off and we were not listening anyway. So this is not like discussion, this is transmission. Anyway, I think I'm done for today. I've shown you some of the new things, some of the existing things, some of our plans, and I welcome input on the forum. Uh, and let us know what you would like to see. I give you some hints of things that we want to add, but you may have much better suggestions. I'm sure. Let us know, and we'll have a look at it. If it's easy to implement, it might appear in the next build, or it might take a bit longer. I want to end the session up. By the way, you all recognize this, right? And you heard some of you heard the intro music. This was Ennio Morricone's week, and next time we'll have a different background. Thanks a lot for your attention, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.